Alright, looks like this sluice gate's our way out. Dave, can you get this open?
Hopefully you're all feeling good, rested, and healthy. Naturally, with such an uncertain time upon us, you decided to unwind with a little Gears of War discussion. I can't think of any place I would rather have you be. Well, maybe in a non-world-ending death spiral, but hey, you're here, so I might as well shut up so I can then start talking more and talk about something less serious. Originally, this was going to be a single video about my analysis of Gears 5, its gameplay, audio, story, but I'm actually going to split the videos up into this, a kind of general analysis video, and another more specific story-driven type one. The discussion really was just getting too big for one video, and I know you might love hearing me talk for hours on end, and I appreciate it if you do, but not everyone does, so it's better this way. Either way, thank you for watching, and I do hope you'll keep an eye out for my next Gears 5 video because I'm lonely and I need you to keep me alive. I'll be general on the story here, so no spoilers. This will have more of a review format, and I hope you'll join me in the next video if you have beaten the story for a longer discussion on the story. With that out of the way, let's begin. Gears of War 5, or Gears 5 officially, after a bit of marketing magic to change the name to make it cleaner, simpler, more robust, sexier. Can we say sexier? I don't have anyone stopping me, so I suppose that I can. Sexier. In a lot of ways, Gears 5 feels like a bold new direction for the franchise. Not in its minute-to-minute gameplay or story per se, but just more in the way that it reimagines the campaign's design in a way that is partially exciting and for the most part genuinely enjoyable in trying to keep the series fresh after so many games. Gears 5 feels like a response to some of the issues I had with its generally good predecessor, Gears of War 4 from 2016. A response you could compare to a home inspection after purchasing a home. The inspector recommends changes or fixes going forward, and the owner selling the house responds saying they'll fix some of the issues, some very well, some introducing their own sets of problems, and they'll ignore the rest. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge a glaring error in my Gears 4 video, where I said that JD Phoenix was voiced by Nolan North. He's actually voiced by Liam McIntyre. McIntyre, am I saying it right? Regardless, this is my own fault completely because I didn't look this up or confirm it. I just said to myself, sounds like Nolan North, might as well be him. Imagine my horror to find that it wasn't him after posting the video. Probably happen again in the future because I'm a dumbass. I promise here that I'll try very, very hard not to make that mistake again. So fortunately I played Gears 5 after 4, so I didn't have to wait long to continue the story, but now I'm finished, so I'm right back where I started, up to date and waiting for more Gears content. It's a weird feeling. Imagine how you feel after getting caught up with your favorite Netflix series. You feel empty and alone. And all you want to do is discuss it with your friends and family, but nobody you speak to knows about it or wants to talk to you about it. And they look at you with disgust and anger. How dare you share with them things that you enjoy? Gears 5 is, for lack of a better way of saying it, just incredibly sexy. Like, look at them curves, bro. Not in its portrayal of the characters of the story, really, more in its visuals. This is a damn good looking game. I say this as a non-tech guy, so I don't know the inner workings of this stuff, nor did I play the game 30 times to notice some weird flaws in its visual designs, but I did notice it's a feast for the eyes. Gameplay itself, visually, the environments and areas you explore, models all look beautiful and textured. The way that areas look broken down, but not artificially so. They feel lived in. My biggest complaint always with this series has been how it artificially makes certain combat arenas where you almost feel like they clearly placed the obstacles here because the designers knew you'd be coming in and placed some convenient barriers to help you take cover. It's very nice of them, but it does feel a little bit of immersion breaking in a way, considering I would go into certain areas inside of myself, well, here comes a fight. The areas themselves feel dilapidated and broken down and wary. They feel lived in, and you can honestly get the sense, given how things look, that humanity has never been prepared for this war and is just barely keeping the swarm at bay. Even more than in previous games, you can see the desperation. Even as the swarm continues to find new avenues of attack, even taking some of their own technology and using it against them. It made me feel the way I did after beating Gears of War 2 years ago. Like, wow, how are they going to come back from this when everything is so screwed? As you can tell, I'm very clearly optimistic. But it's something we got glimpses of in other Gears of War games, but you really see in the way these people live that even before the war, they were all struggling to get by. Now we'll discuss in the next video, but one of the bigger changes Gears 5 makes in its campaign structure where you're not necessarily following a direct path through the game, as Acts 2 and 3 have large open areas and the gameplay and campaign structure aside are literally breathtaking and a visual feast for your eyes. I know I used that analogy already, but it sounds cool and I couldn't think of anything else, so just shut up. Another new mechanic involves you being able to upgrade the robot Jack. He travels with you yet again. Actually, it's more like new Jack. Jack 2.0. He has 3 functions, 2 of which directly rely on your input. He gets abilities to flash, drop shock traps, and scan for enemies, and he can also hijack targets. He can also stim you, which makes you temporarily invincible, provide a barrier, and also cloaks you. Jack also passively shocks enemies to slow them down. All of these abilities and Jack are upgradable by finding components. I liked finding components and upgrading Jack. It added a bit of fun to the game, as assuming you don't go crazy looking for all those components, you really just customize Jack to your liking and your playstyle, which is way different and more interactive than previous titles had given you with Jack. You ride around on the skiff, which is your primary mode of transport in Acts 2 and 3, considering you're traversing massive landscapes. It's a nice change of pace, and I think is fairly well executed, but of course, it feels like it can sometimes break up the pacing of the story and introduces its own issues, which I suppose I would consider more like nitpicks. Suffice to say, I can appreciate the direction they wanted to go in, but it's not a 100% successful experiment, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it anyway. Mainly because it takes the linearity a bit out of the game and turns it on its head, giving you side objectives and locations to explore. It's not a fully open world, more like they took the linear structure and give you a bit more freedom to explore. Again, it does cause for me some pacing issues to an otherwise really solid experiment of ideas. Extreme weather does return, and it's incredible how stable the frame rate is even under all this pressure from the game. We're talking about massive chunks of ice falling from the sky and providing you with cover, but you can shoot them away too. Again, I'm not tech savvy per se, I'm not pretending to be, so I think my Radeon RX 580 graphics card did pretty well on 1080p. Lock 60 FPS. It's pretty awesome and smooth and feels good. Multiplayer in Gears 5 on on the Series X will run at 120 FPS. I have become a frame rate boy now, so even if you can get the game to run at 60, it's good stuff all around. This brings me to the biggest improvement Gears 5 makes over Gears 4 immediately that I saw as soon as I booted it up. Animations. Cutscenes, the motion capture brings these characters to life like we've never seen them before. Subtle movements make all of them feel just a bit more real, while even in gameplay, it gives the game a sleeker feel that you'll appreciate if you're going from 4 to this game. And I'll even say, I remember the original Gears, and even all the way up to Gears 3, at release they all boasted gorgeous visuals. It was a real treat for Xbox players, and now PC players. But Gears 5 boasts some of the best visuals in the series, and I would even go as far to say it's one of the best looking games out there today. I'm sure somebody will come to remind me about another game they thought that looked better, but I think 5 looks like a clear leap forward from its 2016 predecessor. But I will say, if you want to play 60 FPS at 2K or even 4K, don't use my graphics card. That was a Radeon RX 580. It's not unplayable, but you'll probably find it a bit of a slog if you're used to high frame rates, as you'll likely get about 30 FPS, give or take, at 4K, which again, not unplayable, but I know if you're used to 60 FPS or higher, it won't make the cut. So maybe just get something a little more powerful. The next part we'll get into is kind of an easier one to talk about, because this is not a franchise that has ever struggled with good audio and music per se. But nonetheless, we'll discuss it just so we can say we did our due diligence in addressing pretty much everything. Anyway, this brings us to the next part we'll likely only speak of ever so briefly, the sound, the audio, aka what you listen to when you play the game. It's always just solid, there's really not much to say. Good music that evokes emotion and dread and picks up in the pace of battle, audio cues to alert you that all enemies are gone, that it's safe. With voice, we have a really incredible standout performance from Laura Bailey, who really brings what was my personal favorite new character from Gears 4 to life, with a depth and complexity that is carried throughout her performance. We'll get into some specific story beats in the next video, but suffice to say, it's a much bigger role for Kate than in 4, and it's a good choice for the story, as I like JD, and as I said in my video for Gears 4, but I felt his character wasn't strong enough to carry the story or the franchise over multiple games. They ended up proving me wrong in Gears 5, but also kind of indirectly proving me right. More on that later. Nolan North returns as JD and gives a much more nuanced and complex performance than he did in Gears 4. That was a joke, by the way. It's Liam McIntyre or McIntyre or Mr. Tyre that voices JD. I'm not gonna make that mistake again. So yeah, Nolan North really stands out there. For me, as someone who's discussing this game with you, it's hard for me to really go into why a voice actor had such a jaw-dropping or incredible performance without giving you story details, but I do want to save that for the next video. Don't worry though, you're safe for now, you can keep watching, or maybe if you don't like it so far, you can run and not watch it. I don't know. But everything else, it has the gravitas and the grit that you would expect. Weapons sound crunchy and punchy and weighty, where swarms sound vile and feel like they're almost evolving right before your very eyes. There's even a part later on where the Gears discover the swarm are developing their own weapons now, or at least assault rifle based weapons, and you can hear almost the whole thing barely functioning when you use it. It has one function: it gets more accurate the more you fire. Until it misfires. Great engineering, Swarm boys. Not much else to say, it's all fairly solid across the board. None of it is bad, most of it is pretty good, and some of it does stand out. Towards the end, there are some really powerful moments that really highlight the maturity of this series from a testosterone-dripping gun-blazing affair to a series that is not afraid to develop its characters and have quiet moments. Quickly, I'll just mention that this is probably the most refined the gameplay has ever been. You recall in my Gears 4 video, if you watched it, that I said I still held the original Gears of War 1 gameplay as the gold standard of the series. Funny enough, right after beating this, I wanted to finally check out the Gears of War Ultimate Edition on PC. It's a bit odd playing the latest game chronologically in the story and then going back to the beginning, but it was a fun bit of nostalgia while I grind out some multiplayer in 5 and patiently wait for a Gears of War 6, or Gears 6. I will discuss the Ultimate Edition itself in another video, but for now I just want to mention it to say the gameplay for the most part still holds up. Now, it's fairly obvious that the Ultimate Edition is really just the original game with a fresh coat of paint, but it still holds up pretty well considering. Even then, I still hold the original in high regard, but it's hard not to compare 5 and the original considering I played them back to back. I even remember Epic updating Gears of War 2 to balance it, and they basically made that game a shadow of what it once was at release. Truly a tragedy. Thank God the story made up for it. Anyway, it's obvious looking at all these games, the core gameplay has remained the same, with refinements and improvements from the original into 5 that all make the difference. There are smoother animations, which makes moving around easier, and it's easier than ever to control your character around the game and vault over walls and find cover and retreat. The enemy AI is still pretty aggressive, but less so than in 4. The trade-off, however, is that you get more varied enemy types that resemble past ones, but it feels better gameplay-wise. For example, the Swarm Grenadiers sport more armor and grenades, while the Elite Grenadiers have a shotgun and helmet and slowly approach you, making defeating them a priority. Then there's Swarm Hunters, not unlike the Theron Guards, except they're more stealthy and use cloaking to sneak around to different vantage points in combat. Flocks are collections of leeches that can explode if you don't take them down before they get to you. Think like Krill from the past Gears games, except a bit more gameplay friendly. Combine that with tight shooting mechanics and still one of the most reliable cover-based gameplay out there, and Gears 5 is still one of the best games out there in terms of its gameplay. It's easy to pick up and play a few multiplayer matches or jump into the campaign. It's a great time to be a Gears fan. There's a lot of multiplayer modes and it's still a lot of fun to play this day. My favorite multiplayer experience would have to be the Gears of War games and Halo 3, naturally. Again, there's been no drastic changes from game to game, but it didn't really need any. Even so, the Coalition announced they made massive improvements to the latency and overall performance of Gears 5 for its optimization on Series X and S, so maybe now is your time to jump in if you haven't. Again, when I do a review, I don't like to just give out a number score, as I feel that takes the nuance out of the discussion, because you'll pay more attention to my number score than what I actually said, which is that I hate you. No, that's not it, sorry. Simply put, Gears 5 is a really good, sometimes great evolution of the gameplay and story from Gears 4. It boasts gorgeous visuals and a competent story that allows its characters to have softer moments. It may not always succeed in its experimentation of ideas, but as a longtime Gears fan, I really enjoyed my time with it. The multiplayer keeps me playing more than I thought. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, I hope you'll check out my next Gears 5 video coming soon, where we'll discuss the story a bit more in detail with all the spoilers going and flying about. Thank you for watching, and I love you. Maybe.